Hi there. A man came into my workshop last Tuesday. He didn't say much. He placed a photograph on my bench, a photograph of President Kennedy taken the morning of November 22nd, 1963 in Fort Worth, Texas. You can see it clearly if you look carefully on his left wrist, a thin gold watch. Then the man placed that same watch right here in my hands. He said, "I need you to look at this. Not to repair it, just to look at it. I have been a watchmaker for 50 years. I have held many objects that carry history, but this one made me set down my tools. Because this watch was on John Kennedy's wrist when he was shot in Dallas, and what happened to it afterward, I promise you, is one of the most extraordinary stories I have ever encountered." November 22nd, 1963, Fort Worth, Texas. It is 8:45 in the morning. President John F. Kennedy stands at a podium outside the Hotel Texas, speaking to a crowd gathered in a parking lot in light drizzle. He is 46 years old. 12 hours from now, he will be dead. But right now, he is waving, smiling, shaking hands. And on his left wrist, a thin rectangular gold watch, a Cartier, a gift from his wife Jacqueline, given on their 4th wedding anniversary in 1957. Engraved on the case back, his initials, the Kennedy family crest, and their anniversary date. Jackie Kennedy was many things. She was elegance, she was intelligence, she was the woman who single-handedly made the White House a place of culture after decades of stagnation. And she knew watches. She was devoted to Cartier. The tank model in particular, that slim rectangular case, minimal dial, pure line. She had her own. And in 1957, for their anniversary, she chose one for Jack. Not a tank exactly, a round Cartier, gold with a black leather strap, understated, personal. The kind of watch you give someone not to impress the world, but to say, "This is time I want you to carry with you." She could not have known how literally that gift would be fulfilled. The motorcade turns onto Elm Street at 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. The Hertz clock on top of the Texas School Book Depository changes from 12:29 to 12:30 as the limousine makes the turn. Photographs taken that morning show Kennedy's left wrist clearly as he waves to the crowd. The Cartier is there. And then the shots come. 3 shots fired from a 6th-floor window. The president slumps. Jackie screams. The limousine accelerates toward Parkland Memorial Hospital at 80 miles per hour. On his wrist, the Cartier is still ticking. Before I continue, I want to ask you something. You are watching this on whatever device you are on right now. Look at your own watch, or your phone. What time is it where you are? I ask because 12:30 p.m. on November 22nd, 1963, is one of those moments that exist outside of normal time. One of those moments where everything before and everything after are permanently divided. The watch on Kennedy's wrist did not stop at 12:30. Time kept moving. The watch kept ticking. And that, I will tell you, is where this story truly begins. Write in the comments, what time is it where you are right now? I want to know how many time zones are watching this story together. At Parkland Memorial Hospital, the trauma team desperately works to save the president in the emergency room. Doctors Malcolm Perry and Kemp Clark fight for his life, which is already fading. At 1:00 p.m. Central Standard Time, 30 minutes after the shooting, President Kennedy is pronounced dead. In the chaos of the trauma room, his watch is removed from his wrist. It passes through the hands of a Secret Service agent, and then it is handed to Jacqueline Kennedy. She is still wearing her pink Chanel suit, the same one with her husband's blood on it. She refused to change. She wants the world to see what they did. She takes the watch, and later, in the chaos of the following weeks, she gives it to the one woman who was closest to her husband over the years, his personal secretary, Evelyn Lincoln. Evelyn Lincoln had been Kennedy's personal secretary since his days in the Senate. She knew his schedule before he did. She knew his handwriting. She knew his moods. She was the guardian of his private world. After his death, she was awarded thousands of items from Kennedy's personal effects, letters, photographs, documents, objects. She kept them for decades, in a house in Maryland, surrounded by the artifacts of a presidency cut short. The Cartier watch was among them. And when Evelyn Lincoln died, her collection passed on to a man named Robert White, a collector, the most devoted accumulator of Kennedy memorabilia in the world. Robert White devoted his life to collecting Kennedy memorabilia, Over decades, he amassed one of the most extraordinary private collections of presidential artifacts ever assembled: letters, personal items, clothing, objects touched by Kennedy's hands. He also acquired the Cartier watch. He tried to sell it several times, but the sales never went through. The reasons have never been fully explained. And then Robert White died of a heart attack. He was 54 years old. His collection, which RFK himself had wanted kept together, which Evelyn Lincoln had preserved for 30 years, was auctioned off in separate lots, scattered to the winds. And the Cartier watch, the one that was on Kennedy's wrist when the world changed, passed into the hands of a man named Christopher Fulton. I want to pause here for a moment, because I have been a watchmaker for 50 years, and I have noticed something about objects that carry great tragedy. They seem to resist staying still. They move from hand to hand. They disturb the peace of everyone who holds them. The Cartier had already passed through 6 pairs of hands: Kennedy, Jackie, a Secret Service agent, Evelyn Lincoln, Robert White, each one touched by tragedy in their own way. Tell me in the comments, do you believe that objects can carry the energy of the events they witnessed? Or is this simply a watch, a mechanism of gears and springs that knows nothing of what happened around it? I have my own answer, but I want to hear yours first. Christopher Fulton was a successful construction developer in Vancouver, Canada. In the mid-1990s, through the estate of Evelyn Lincoln, he came to possess a remarkable collection of Kennedy materials, including JFK's secret Oval Office recordings, personal documents, and the Cartier watch that had been on Kennedy's wrist in Dallas. He also acquired something else, the knowledge of what those recordings contained, and that knowledge made him dangerous. The U.S. government wanted those materials classified. The evidence, they said, had to be confiscated. In August 1998, Christopher Fulton was arrested at his home by the Canadian Mounties, extradited to the United States, prosecuted under a sealed warrant, and sentenced to years in federal prison, one of the harshest in the country. But I must tell you about the other watches. Because Kennedy did not own just one. He owned at least 4, and each one tells a different story about who he was. There was the Omega Ultra Thin, the gift from his friend Grant Stockdale, inscribed President of the United States John F. Kennedy, from his friend Grant. The watch he wore to his inauguration. The watch he wore sailing in Hyannisport in chinos and a polo shirt, looking like any man on any boat on any summer day. That watch is in the Omega Museum in Biel, Switzerland, today, not far from this workshop, as a matter of fact. I could walk there. JFK, shot in 1963. Bobby Kennedy, shot in 1968. Evelyn Lincoln. Her collection scattered, her life's work auctioned off in pieces. Robert White, dead at 54 of a heart attack, his collection dissolved. Christopher Fulton, 8 years in federal prison. JFK Jr., dead in the ocean at 38. Every single person who held this watch with the intention of telling its story paid a price. I am an old man. I have held this watch for 4 days now, and I want to ask you directly, honestly, would you hold it? If someone placed this watch in your hands and said, "This is Kennedy's. It is yours now," what would you do? Write it in the comments. I am genuinely asking. But I must tell you about the other watches, because Kennedy did not own just one. He owned at least 4, and each one tells a different story about who he was. There was the Omega Ultra Thin, the gift from his friend Grant Stockdale, inscribed President of the United States John F. Kennedy, from his friend Grant. The watch he wore to his inauguration. The watch he wore sailing in Hyannisport in chinos and a polo shirt, looking like any man on any boat on any summer day. That watch is in the Omega Museum in Biel, Switzerland, today. Not far from this workshop, as a matter of fact. I could walk there. And then there was the Rolex, a gold Rolex day-date, the most famous watch he never wore. On May 29, 1962, Kennedy's 45th birthday, Marilyn Monroe stood at Madison Square Garden in a dress so fitted it had to be sewn onto her body, and sang "Happy Birthday" to the President of the United States in a voice that made the entire world understand exactly what was happening between them. A few days later, a gold Rolex arrived, engraved on the back jack with "Love as Always," from Pure YN, May 29, 1962. Kennedy looked at it, and then he handed it to his aide and said, "Get rid of this. Jackie cannot see this." The Rolex disappeared for decades, and then it surfaced at auction in 2005, sold for $120,000. The watch from the most famous secret in American history, still ticking. And there was a 4th watch, The first watch Kennedy was ever photographed wearing a gold Belova, Art Deco style, on a stretched gold bracelet. A plate engraved at the bottom, JFK 1941, a gift from a female admirer at a Washington function. 1941, the year Kennedy joined the U.S. Naval Reserve, before PT 109, before Congress, before the presidency, before Dallas. He was just a young man in Washington with a gift from someone who admired him, and an entire life still ahead. That Belova was auctioned in 2013. Its current whereabouts are unknown. Even the first watch has disappeared. The Cartier, the one the man brought to my workshop, if it is authentic, and I have been examining it carefully, it has no publicly documented ownership history after JFK Jr.'s death. It does not appear at any major auction house. It cannot be traced to any known collection. Researchers who have spent years investigating it have concluded simply, we may never know where it is, or if it still exists. The watch that was on Kennedy's wrist when he died. The watch that passed through 7 pairs of hands, each of them marked by tragedy. The watch that a man brought to a small workshop on a narrow street in Switzerland and asked an old watchmaker simply to look at. When I open a watch, any watch, I see the same thing. A system of extraordinary precision. Springs wound to exact tolerances. Gears meshing at fractions of a millimeter. A mechanism that has no politics, no nationality, no memory of what happened around it. It simply measures the passage of time. Second by second, without judgment, without grief, without any understanding of what those seconds meant to the people who lived through them. But the people who made this watch, the craftsmen at Cartier in Paris in the 1950s, they could never have imagined where it would end up. On the wrist of the most powerful man in the world, in a hospital in Dallas, in a box in Maryland, in a prison evidence log, in the hands of a dead man's son, and in an old watchmaker's hands on a rainy Tuesday in Switzerland, 60 years later. The man who brought this to me came back yesterday. He took it with him. He did not tell me where he was taking it. I did not ask. In 50 years of watchmaking, I have learned one thing above all others. A watch does not belong to whoever holds it. A watch belongs to time, and time eventually reveals everything. If this story moved you, subscribe to this channel. There are more watches on this bench. Each one has carried something through history that most people never knew about. I will tell you those stories one by one, as long as I am here. And leave me a comment. I want to know what is the most meaningful object you own. Not the most expensive, the most meaningful. The thing that if you were gone, someone might hold 60 years from now and wonder about. Thank you for watching. I will see you at the next watch.